As a financial therapist, one of the most frequently asked questions from couples is, how do we share our expenses once we're married? And you can replace married with seriously committed or cohabitating, but this is like when we're deep into very committed territory. And it might surprise you, but it kind of depends. In this video, I'm going to walk through some of the most common ways in which couples divvy up their finances so you can decide what works best for you and your partner. Here's the thing about however you decide to divvy up your finances. You must be talking about your money regularly and calmly enough so that conversations like this can happen. I'm a huge fan of money dates, and to have money dates available on the calendar, ready to go, so you can come back to these different ways that I'm discussing and decide, is what we're doing still working for us, or do we need to tweak it a little bit? With that, let's get into the most common ways that I see people split their finances when they are committed to one another. Splitting things right down the middle. Splitting expenses 50-50 is a common way that I see a lot of couples split up their finances. In some ways, it's great because no matter what the tab is, you just divvy it right down the middle. And for other people, this doesn't work so well. This method is no bones about it. It is very straightforward. You just split everything exactly 50-50. The pros are that it's really easy to figure out. The math will always math because you just divide things by 2. It works really well for couples who have similar incomes, similar expenses, and similar work schedules and responsibilities. It doesn't work so well if one person earns significantly more than somebody else, if somebody else is charged with more of the caregiving, child rearing, housekeeping stuff. Then it's not typically my favorite approach. But if you're kind of earning the same amount and you have the same amount of energy expended in other places, 50-50 could be a really great way to do this. Another popular way is to kind of split your expenses by your income. It is very diplomatic. A great way to do this is to figure out how much money are we earning combined as a couple, and of that 100%, how much of that 100% are each of us bringing in? For example, if somebody's bringing in 70% of the income, then they would pay for 70% of the expenses. Similarly, the person who's bringing in 30% of the income would be responsible for 30% of the expenses. You can kind of divvy it up in that type of way. It's great, especially if you've got really big financial differentials of who is earning what, but it can also be a little bit tedious in terms of renegotiating percentage splits. And I often find for the person who's earning less, they often feel like they have to ask permission of the person who is earning more if they want to do something like discretionary spending. And it can feel like when we visualize that income as that kind of pie of who's earning what, it can also start to feel like there is a big power differential. So that is not always my favorite, but for some people, they really like it and it works for them. But you have to be conscientious of renegotiating that split when there are income fluctuations, particularly if there's a person who works on like commissions or bonuses. You're going to need to check it and do that. Now, at the same time, if you're a person who works on commissions and bonuses, you might want to check in every month anyway. And so maybe splitting expenses by income works really well for you. Another way that I've seen people split things up is splitting it by ownership. I particularly see this happen with couples later in life. So maybe, for example, one person in that partnership already owns a home. So they just take on, look, I've had those home ownership expenses for years. I'm just going to keep covering my mortgage and the associated utilities that come along with it. Similarly, if you are merging your finances after a long time, maybe having separate families, maybe one person continues to pay for the expenses of childcare for the child that they brought into that relationship. However, I find it's definitely worth renegotiating when there are more financial life changes, meaning that house gets paid off. Then who's in charge of the utilities associated with that house? Or that child is no longer 12, they're 20 and they're out of the house. Now what do we do with that discretionary income? So thinking through it can be really helpful. Another way that I see things divvied up is everything just goes into one bucket and everything comes out of one bucket. It's less of this is my money, this is your money, this is my expense, this is your expense. It's just what we earn goes into the same place and what we owe comes out of the same place. Another thing that comes up a lot is how to share expenses is also like the logistics of how to share them. Usually there are 3 common ways that I see people share their expenses when they are married, and they are completely separate accounts. So a theirs account and a mine account. And then depending on which of the methods I discussed earlier, there might be some money sharing that goes on. So there might be writing a check at the end of the month if anybody still writes checks, or moving money from one account to another account at the end of the month, or Venmoing money back and forth. When you're in the theirs and mine style of keeping your money separate, you have to be really conscientious of if you're doing a 50-50 split or that split based on income, you really need to be conscientious of when you're doing that. Personally, for me, I find like the constant Venmoing or check writing really tedious. And if I were in that situation, I would advise couples once a month or twice a month to be adding up those expenses and tallying those expenses and moving them back and forth. For something like that, I would personally use something like Splitwise. Splitwise is an app that kind of keeps a running tally of things, and then you can settle up with the person at the end of the month. Splitwise helps you to see and track your shared expenses and balances so that instead of sending little amounts back and forth, you can just have one total amount at the end of a certain time period, and you can send the money back and forth in that way. Sidebar, I personally love using Splitwise on trips. Maybe I'll make a video about that in the future so you can figure out how to divvy up costs with friends and family that you're traveling with. The next style of types of accounts when you're married is a theirs, mine, and ours. This is where each individual income goes into theirs and mine, those types of accounts, and then of that theirs and mine, a portion of that income goes into an ours account. So in that ours account is where you do things like your shared expenses that you agreed on in the way that you split up the accounts. The third method is a joint account or an ours only account. So instead of a theirs, mine only or theirs, mine, and ours, you just have the ours account. So this is really the best method if you put everything into the same pot and everything comes out of the same pot. The key to any of these, theirs, mine, and ours, theirs, mine only, or ours only, is to keep the conversation going, making sure that the way that you have decided to split and share expenses still works for you, and the method of the different style account or the logistics of the account still works for you. Let me know if you're in a relationship which of these methods you use. If you have a version of a shared account, theirs, mine, and ours, or ours only, and you're in a millennial couple who's earning $150,000 or more combined, I would love to invite you into my self-paced course, Clarify Your Money. It is a values-based budgeting course for millennial couples. And throughout the course of several different modules, you're going to learn what your money type is, figure out what your values are, and create an automated spending plan that actually works for you. You can learn more about it. I will link it below in the comments. I stopped seeing couples in my practice in March of 2022 because I saw so many of them had the exact same frustrations and complaints. And so instead, I've created a self-paced course just for you. So if that sounds good to you, if you clicked on this video because you're trying to figure it out and you're sort of on the same page, I want you to go check out that course and see if it might be a fit for you. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.